but I'm going to pass it over to Sasha to introduce Coding Rooms and himself.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks everyone for having us here. This is actually, I think, the first time that we're doing a CSTA presentation, so it's awesome to meet all you folks here, despite the virtual setting. And I'm really excited that we have a smaller group. So I'd love to start the discussion with some more interactive stuff before we actually jump into kind of what Coding Rooms is and why some people are choosing to use it. Really briefly, I took AP Computer Science as a freshman in high school, and that for me sparked a I'd say probably like six-year-long journey in trying to figure out how could we make the learning experience better. And so in high school, I started hacking on building online IDEs, and that kind of became a passion, and I went through a few different revisions. And when COVID happened, I decided like, okay, this is probably something that people need right now. And it's the ability to be able to see students code in real time. Because anytime I had taught webinars, presentations, anytime I was teaching people how to code, I felt like I was always screaming into the void. Just sort of talking about different concepts, and there would be some typing going on. And then I would kind of walk around to gauge people's understanding. And of course, the vast majority of people were either completely disengaged shopping on Amazon or had really major issues understanding what we were doing. And I think this problem is like really challenging in computer science. So that's kind of why I started working on Coding Rooms, and we've been around for just over a year with this product now, although it's something I've been working on for quite a few years. And I actually have one of our team members joining here, Kareem. You can probably wave his hand here if he's got his video on. Yeah, there he is. And then we're actually a 12-person team now. And we serve quite a few schools in the US, the UK, and Asia. So I mentioned a lot about IDEs. And the way I like to think about it is that there's quite a few different IDE options. I personally love to use IntelliJ for my professional development work, and there's VS Code, there's Replit, there's all these different types of IDE platforms, and they all have their own different merits as online IDEs. And the way I think about Coding Rooms is that we're actually an education tool that happens to have a really powerful IDE tacked onto it. So when we actually go into Coding Rooms, you'll see that it's really focused around education, and our only goal is to make teachers' lives easier and help students learn better. So that's a quick sort of background on Coding Rooms. And I'd actually like to pose a question to you all. What kind of challenges have you been facing like teaching in this remote setting? I know that there's probably tons of different issues, and I always kind of get frustrated when people ask me this question. What are your challenges with XYZ? So I understand that it might be a frustrating question to hear, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts if there are any things that stand out about remote teaching.
I'd love to answer that question.
Sure. Yeah,
I was going to say, okay, go ahead, Liz.
Phantom students is a big issue. They sign into the Zoom and you see their name, and then you say Johnny, and Johnny's not there.
Mm-hmm.
So phantom students is a big issue. It's the engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I would build on that. It's, teacher, I like to use all the input. So I'm reading visual clues from my students, and are they frustrated? Are they distracted? Are they excited? And that all that goes away now.
Mm-hmm. I also saw plagiarism in the chat. I think, if I'm not mistaken, computer science is probably one of the most plagiarized subjects around. We're actually working on that problem right now at Coding Rooms. Are there any other points? Engagement. I think hear a lot about engagement.
My funny plagiarism is the kids copied my work because I do a model piece, and they copied my work. Like, no, nobody else would do Winnie the Pooh dance but me for a web page. Like, no.
The other thing I would add is you know, in person, I love to do, you know, put the kids into pairs, and they're doing pair programming and working together in small groups. You try to do it with Zoom, you put them in a breakout room, but the dynamic is so much different, right? Too often I get into a breakout room, cameras are off, microphones are muted. I'm like, what is going on here? So it's much harder to pull that off in a virtual world, at least the way I've been doing.
Mm-hmm. I definitely hear you on that.
And you were mentioning about the IDEs. You know, in class I like to use Eclipse, but not every student has access to it, or they not use it properly. So that's why I have to rely on something else, like a Replit or something like that. So I wish we had something better than what we're doing, but doing virtually, you have to rely on something like Replit to do our work.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's similar to what the other gentleman was just saying about the breakout rooms. I've been putting the kids also recently in breakout rooms, which is nice. They can do some work together. However, I feel like I'm then unattached to them. Not that I can't join their breakout room, but when I'm teaching a class in front of me and I'm also have the breakout rooms going for the people that are remote, I don't have the time to go into each individual chat room. So once they go into their breakout room, I feel like I've lost touch, and I'd like to be able to run a class, you know, be able to say something more to them without pulling them back out of the breakout room. You know, it's just cumbersome. So I'm coming here tonight because I didn't know what this was about, and I was just wondering if it had any better features than that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I find is in class, when you're in person, you know, you can just sort of walk around the room and see where people are, look at their screens and see what they're doing. And it's really, I find it difficult to see where people are in the moment, you know, as they're working through the problems.
Mm-hmm.
I find the students shy to ask for help debugging. If they're in the classroom, they ask for help more so because I have a hybrid model. But when they're at home, they're shy and they don't ask, and then they don't finish their programs. When I go to grade them, they're not there.
Mm-hmm. Any other feedback?
One more thought I had was sometimes I have my students working on a project and it's going to take several days, and I'll have them on a daily basis kind of touch base with me, like show me the progress. Like I like to look at the work, to see things are happening. So that's one of the things I try to do in this virtual situation is I'll ask them to submit something and I'll see the progress on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Well, I'm going to say that one of the problems I'm finding is that since we're online, I'm online right now, students have different types of computers with different anomalies. And so maybe I'll be using or even different versions of software. And so it's sometimes very difficult for me to figure out what their problem is because I'm working with a certain software and they're doing something else.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a problem.
Not to steal Sasha's thunder here, but one of the great things of everything you guys listed is coding rooms helps with almost each and every one of those things, or is looking to, and that was why I fell in love with it. Is a number of these problems you listed were problems I had, and then I stumbled upon this product, and it really helped solve or aid in solving some of these issues.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in, Joe. I definitely echo that thought. So I'm really interested to know, so we talked a lot about these various different problems, and there's of course like a sort of infinite set of potential solutions, right? I'm really interested to hear if you were designing a platform to solve those problems, or like you were designing a tool, what would it look like? What would it do?
Well, for the problem I was describing, it would have some kind of feature where you could like interrupt, you know, each individual breakout room at one time and say something, like make an announcement or something like that. So if I wanted them to come back, I could say, hey guys, come back in now, instead of closing the breakout room and it has 30 seconds and then it makes them out, you know, they don't even know I'm closing it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would want to see all the breakout rooms like in little screens.
Mm.
So what they're sharing, I can see what's going on there. So if there's like a dark room, I go, all right, I need to go there because those guys are doing nothing. And then as Eileen mentioned, you know, I should be able to open it up and just be able to speak to everyone at once, like, you know, God speaking to all the rooms at once, kind of thing, without having to pull them back.
Getting to see the students work in real time would be really helpful. And I realize I do have that tool, but it's only if they're on their Chromebooks. And the Chromebooks are so inferior of devices that the kids who really code don't use the Chromebook. So but just to be able to see what they do in real time would be a great asset.
Love to see something kind of like Turnitin, but for code. So I use a plagiarism checker, but it checks only against all the whatever I put into the folder. So if I put all of the students' files in, it checks against each other, but not just out on the web.
Mm-hmm. Any other points?
Hi, could you tell me what that's called? Because it sounds like a wonderful product that I don't know about.
The one that I use?
Yeah.
It's from Stanford. It's free.
Moss?
I don't remember. Anybody else use it that knows?
I think it's probably Moss.
Yes, Moss.
Yeah,
How do you spell that?
MOSS. So it works pretty well. It gives you, like, you know, the comparison report and everything, but it just works from one student to another. So if they're pulling it offline and they only use it themselves.
Any other thoughts? Okay, awesome. I saw in the chat also about checking if code was copy and pasted. We actually have some interesting solutions for that. So why don't we kind of jump into coding rooms here? I figured instead of just screen sharing a demo, the best way would be just invite y'all into a live classroom. So I shared a link in the chat. You can click on that link. You don't need to sign in. You can just put your name. And then I'll actually start to see you on my screen. I'll go ahead and also share that here. So you should be able to see my screen here and code on coding rooms. Please let me know if anyone has trouble joining. So if you're able to have Zoom and coding rooms open, you'll actually see that I can see all of you joining in the student activity monitor, and you can see Joe is typing here as well. And I think I actually have a sample of Joe's code here. So I think this is one you shared with me a while ago, this Pygame example. Can everyone see that all right? Awesome. Cool. So I think I've got most of you folks in here. So this is what Coding Room's live classroom looks like for the instructor. And then you're actually seeing the student view because you use the student login link. I disabled audio video conferencing within Coding Rooms for this classroom, but you can actually, if you use Coding Rooms for your lessons, you can actually turn on our embedded conferencing, and then you don't need to use multiple tools. You can just run your entire live class in Coding Rooms. So the primary feature here of Coding Rooms is the fact that all of our workspaces are synced in real time, and you can see folks editing. For example, if I highlight a line, you should be able to see me working there. And the same is true for all the students' code. So this is the presentation workspace. So for example, if I were an instructor for a course, I could set up a template, drop my code in here, discuss a reference solution or a template, and then you as the students could click into the My Workspace tab, which is the coding environment that is only available to you as a student. And so do you all see the My Workspace tab at the top?
Yeah.
So you all can click into that, and you can get a side-by-side view, and then you can basically toggle the different buttons to rearrange the screen however you want. And that's what the student sees. And then here is the instructor. This is what I see. I see a list of all the students in my class, and then I have a scrollable list of all their workspaces, of all their code. So I can see different folks' code and whether or not they're actually active and working on it. And if you run it, I'll actually see that, for example, Doug, you ran your code once and you didn't have any errors when you ran. But Doug, if you make a syntax error, for example, in your code and you click run, you'll actually see that I'll get a little error notification here as well to see, yep. So Doug had one recent error. So this is a really easy way at a glance to see if your students are active, if they're running code, and then ultimately if they have issues, for example, I can just click on Doug and jump in and see what issue he had. So line 6, and scroll back up here, you can see Doug's cursor, and I can also see him typing along with me. So this enables me to basically give somewhat of a one-on-one experience, you could say, for a larger group of students during a remote or socially distanced class. Students can also raise their hand if they want to be prioritized or get your attention, and then that's only visible to you as the instructor. So for example, you all, if someone raises their hand, you all won't actually see it from the student perspective. You can scroll here and see the list though. So that's a brief intro to the actual sort of information architecture of a live classroom. I know there's a lot of different stuff, and this is kind of a paradigm shift, you could say, from how other IDEs work. So I'd love to hear if y'all have any questions. I can slow down or jump into some more specific details here.
So Sasha, like I mentioned, I like having the kids work in pairs. Is there a way to make it happen like that in here?
So we're working on a more comprehensive way to do group work within live classrooms. The way that folks have been doing it right now is that they create live classrooms, or their students create live classrooms and then share the links. So students can create a free live classroom with up to 5 other students and work together, and then they can share that link to you, and you as the instructor can jump in.
What does that mean to create a live classroom?
So basically they'll just go into coding rooms and click the little plus icon that we have in the top right and create a new live classroom. And it's this form where they basically name it, select a language. They can enable conferencing and create. And then they'll have a link, this copy link, that enables them to share it with their friends that they're going to work with. And then they can also share it to you as the instructor.
And then as the instructor, though, do I get that sort of God's eye view where I can see what everyone's doing at once?
No, you'd have to drop into them individually.
Okay.
So what I've done, Doug, is I actually create the links for the students, because you can create as many live classrooms as you want. And I give the groups the link, and then I'm an admin on it, so I have full view. But one of the things is you have that presentation in my workspace area. So for group work, I have them use the presentation area for the actual submission of the group work. So even if you weren't an admin, you could technically see that work still. And then the My Workspace thing is kind of when they want to test things on their own. They can go there and kind of mess around on their own. And then the collaborative space is the presentation. Kind of like you were doing. So you put that syntax error in your specific workspace but then the presentation we all can see. So you can mess around with things privately before actually bringing it to the whole group.
We're working on nicer ways to pair up students right now within a single active live classroom, because we've definitely heard this feedback a lot. So you can just like auto-generate a group, and during class, like assign them essentially into like their own sort of breakout rooms. That's not available yet at the moment. That's
I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's okay. It says active, say 6 minutes ago. What is that tracking?
So that's tracking keystrokes in the My Workspace. So I can search for you here. So I see you were active 5 minutes ago. And so if you type in your My Workspace, then this will update here. So a kind of easy way to gauge engagement or sort of measure engagement is to just run through the list and see who's active when.
Can you sort it by that?
Yeah, right now we have a couple different ways to sort, and we'll be adding activity soon as well.
And the students have the presentation in My Workspace, but they can turn those on and off. As the instructor, can you force it to show the presentation if you're going over something?
Not at the moment, no. You're not able to like force those kind of layout changes on their screens. That's something that we'll definitely look into. Sounds interesting.
And then my last question, does it have a debugger?
So it does not have an integrated debugger at the moment. What I can show at the end is Visual Studio Code. So we've actually integrated Jupyter notebooks into coding rooms already. And we're working to integrate, basically to finish integrating Visual Studio Code so that you can have this dashboard, but then your students are actually working on Visual Studio Code in the browser running on coding rooms. And that has a debugger to answer your question.
Yeah, that's what I use now.
Yeah.
Do you mean Visual Studio, Microsoft Visual Studio, or something else?
So Microsoft Visual Studio Code, which is it's very different from Visual Studio. It's an open source text editor. I wouldn't call it necessarily like a fully blown IDE.
Because I miss one of the things is I was teaching Visual Basic, and I couldn't do that in Replit.
Yeah, we have a Visual Basic interpreter available here. So I can change it on My Workspace here. You all can see this list of languages. So we do support Visual Basic. And so you can run most Visual Basic here as well. And actually, when it comes to running graphical programs, we have a View desktop that you can open up a virtual desktop here. And this is shared. So if you all actually go into it from the presentation, you'll be able to see this. And I always open it in a new tab. Just because it's a lot bigger there. So it should be able to run the code now. And someone, if they want to press the WASD keys, you can play Pong with me here if you join in the virtual desktop. Because I think this is playing from the presentation. Is anyone able to load this, load the game actually on the presentation? I think for the left side, if you use the WASD keys, someone can play it. I see someone mousing around here.
I got it up. I'm one-handed here.
Yeah. Do you have the WASD side?
Yep, WASD's working.
So Joe and I are, I think this is Joe, right?
I'm moving it on the left.
So we spend like quite a bit of effort to get graphics to work well. So this is a use case that we're really excited about in terms of being able to load and execute much larger, not just sort of toy problems on coding rooms.
This was something that I've never seen an online developing environment support graphics this well. And I like to have different graphics things, you know, GUIs and stuff throughout the course, even if it's just for little data visualizations, and it works beautifully on Coding.
And we also give, just to kind of clarify a little bit on how the online IDE works, we also give dedicated resources to each student. So you won't have the issues of like slow code execution or people competing for resources on our servers, because we scale the actual nettle capacity that we have set up based on how many students are online. Then we actually sandbox students, so even if they're not using all the resources, they still have everything available. So when you have like burst usage, or for example, you're playing something like Pong, that's quite CPU heavy, students will have pretty much guaranteed performance day in and day out. So I'm turning back to the coding environment here. So this presentation right now is also editable for everyone, and I see someone left a comment in the code as well, Joe. So you can have your students collaborate here with you, or you can also, when you create the classroom, you can make this read-only, so that it's only you as the instructor, or if you add TAs, only you and your TAs can actually edit the code here. And if you have multiple files or directories, you can add that real time. If you just open the file manager here, you can also upload code and download a zip at any time. And one of the nice things about the live classroom as well is that they are persistent even between sessions. So you can schedule a live classroom with, for you and your students for a particular unit, for example. And even if you're teaching that unit several days in a row, the students will always come back and have the same code that they started with. And as the instructor, you can also go and play back the code. So I don't know how many edits we have here, but for example, if I were to go in, say, an example comment, and then I could also use this to do an example of copy pasting. And I go to playback, and as the instructor, you can do this at any time. You can see all the code playback keystroke by keystroke. So you can see my detailed edit log, and then you can also really clearly differentiate a student actually typing on and working on a solution from a copy paste event like this that happens in one frame. And we are working on setting up automated flags. So if we notice novel code pasted in that doesn't come from within the student's solution, to also flag students for copy pasting external resources. And that works the same way in the live classroom as it does in the assignments that I can show in a moment here. And Joe, I'm not sure if you see the chat as well. I think someone's asking to be let into the.
Not a problem, Nancy, I will.
Yeah. Are there any other questions about the live classroom part of coding rooms? Are there any things that you all wish it had aside from the ability to handle pair programming better?
Well, I'd like to ask Joe, because Joe, you've been using this and used to use what, like Replit before, right?
Correct, absolutely.
Tell me about life before and after.
One more time, Doug, I just didn't hear the specific of.
So tell me about life before and after using
Okay.
coding rooms. Like,
So Replit is really just an online developing environment, online IDE. The wonderful thing about coding rooms, if I was just to give you the quick comparison, is this actually has tools built into it to aid in your teaching. So I assume Sasha's going to probably show this live classroom is just one of the features. There's essentially three main features to it. You can create these live classrooms. where you and the students can interact together in this really collaborative sense. You can create an assignment where students just, code on their own and can submit, and you can have auto grading for that. And you can look at student submissions and students while they're working in real time on the assignment. And then students can just create their own projects, workspaces to just work on things. So those are kind of the three different areas. Replit only has students creating project areas for them to work on. Even if you use the paid Teams product, where you can kind of look at their spaces, it doesn't offer the same kind of features that this offers with it. You don't have this live classroom that we're looking at is the absolutely unique feature. Mainly what I do in the live classroom, what I was going to say, so I might as well, while I have the mic, I guess, is the presentation area, you can make it so only the teacher can edit. So right now we're all editing it. Most of the time I actually have it that I'm just editing it. I'm like teaching a lesson and they just use that as to follow along. And even in person, my students have said it's a lot easier to follow along with a lesson because you can even scroll up and down at your own pace so you can look back. When I was just doing, screen sharing, even in the classroom, not when we were remote, the students could see only what I was showing. So even sometimes a student would fall way behind and they'd be like, can you scroll up for a minute? I think I missed something because something wasn't working right. I have to scroll back up in the code. They freely can move around what you're demoing as you're doing it. And then you can turn on I like to turn on that the presentation can be edited by everyone when we're doing a review and I'm asking students to add things. I'll say, all right, Doug, can you go over here and how do you do X? You know what I mean? And they go in and they do that. So it's really versatile. But if anyone else has questions for me as a teacher using it, I can for sure answer those questions.
And any other points about the live classroom? Okay, awesome. So kind of actually, as Joe mentioned, there are those three main parts of coding rooms. And so I will jump out of the live classroom and share a course that I built in coding rooms. So this is a course that I created recently here off of a template that we have for Python. We also have one for Java. They're both about 115 open source assignments that you can use as a template for your classes. And the assignments in coding rooms, they have the same IDE as we have in the live classroom, except for here you can set up auto grading tasks and collect submissions and manage a grade book. So I'm going to switch to a specific assignment here. I can't seem to find the one that I was looking to demo. We can just start with sum of three numbers then. This is a pre-built assignment and it links out to some lessons. You can create these on your own, entirely on your own, or you can actually modify the ones that we have and provide them to your students. This one is not, or it's already assigned, it doesn't have a due date, but I can still go in and edit the template and set up test cases. I won't go through the entire process. It'll look much the same if you're starting a fresh assignment, just most of this will be our standard boilerplate as opposed to a more complete boilerplate. So there's this example template set up here, and I can modify this. Let's do this. So I can run it and get an error there, save changes. So I set up a template for my students, and then we're able to set up test cases. So these are pretty straightforward input-output test cases. You can add as many of these test cases as you like, and you can give them different point values and feedback on failure. And you can also add a couple different types of test cases. So those were input-output comparisons. You can also add unit tests. So I won't use a unit test for this example, but for Python, we use the built-in Python unit test library. So it's all standard unit testing code if you're familiar with it. And for Java, we use JUnit4, which is a fairly standard unit testing library for Java. Since we won't use this, I'll delete this test case. And we'll stick with these three. And then you can also set up model solutions for your students. And I'll go ahead and copy this one since that's what we use. And I'll go in to preview this as if I were a student. So I always like to open that in a new tab. And here we are. This is what the student will see when you assign a programming assignment to them. You can open up the workspace and they have our full ID here, and then they have the template that you, or the problem that you assigned. So initially, for example, I can go ahead and submit this, and then I'll fail all the unit tests, or I'll fail all the input-output tests. So you can see here, we have a pretty cohesive UI for students to compare. Like if you have really long input-output problems with lots of different, like different white space, for example, we have a pretty diff editor where students can scroll through the actual and expected outputs for their test cases. And I see that all three of my test cases failed. So actually we fixed the code here, and I can run it here first in the terminal. Looks like we passed, and then can run it on the unit tests, or sorry, the input-output tests. And see, 100% score. We're working on options for you to have private test cases so that the students will only see a part of the test cases, so that they can't just sort of test case hack if you have a smaller set of test cases, as well as limiting the amount of solutions that they can provide or amount of submissions that they can send in. And the neat part is that once the student has started working on their code, you as the instructor can actually see them working on it from the gradebook. You can see I have one of our colleagues joined here, and she hasn't submitted anything and so far has a top score of 0, but I've created 2 submissions that have 100%, but I can drop into her solution as well. And you can see here that she's working on a way to add numbers. And so I can run her code. Looks like she also ran it here. And I can actually jump into her solution and kind of create a custom solution here as well. Oops. Do any Python people know? Oops.
There you go. Input's a function.
Cool. All right. So fix her solution and submit it on her behalf. And as the instructor, you can also then leave comments. And we also have a chat. So if you're working with students remotely or you want to provide feedback during class, you can use the chat either to all the students or just to a specific student to provide feedback. And this is persistent. So even if they leave, refresh the page, or they come back in for the first time, if they weren't online when you're providing feedback, they're able to view your comments, update the code, and create another submission. Are there any other questions about the auto grading side of coding rooms or the assignments? I think if you come from any other tool that allows you to do auto grading, hopefully will feel fairly straightforward. I'd say one thing that I definitely see a lot is use of the live classroom as a way to basically proctor exams. So if you're doing a remote exam, you can see all of your students working on the exam in the live classroom. So there's definitely different use cases where sometimes assignments make sense, sometimes the live classroom makes more sense. And we're working to connect up assignments to live classroom so that you can select an assignment to work on actually in real time during class, and then auto grade and everything during a live class as well. But for now, these are kind of separate features in coding rooms. And I'd say one last thing that I'll cover is the ability for students to create workspaces. So I have a few workspaces that I had here. And your students, if they create a free account on Coding Rooms, they can also just jump in, select a language, and create an example Java project here. I can also share the link with you all. And so you all can join read-only into this environment as well. And you can fork to have your own version of it. And so your students can like build their own projects here on the side and then share this back with you as well, if you like. There's also a handful of different configurations that they can use if you're building more complicated projects. And also, soon we'll be adding a way for them to add editors into a workspace as well, and to upgrade people who have view-only access into editors as well.
For those APCSA teachers and Java people too, Sasha, could you go back over to the custom configuration? I really liked this because a lot of the editors don't usually have something like this, where especially if you set up an assignment, you can kind of set up the run configuration to make sure your jar is going to work right for the students and stuff. So sometimes like that setup's really complicated, especially when you're trying to use these different things on a Chromebook. Even something like Replit is really complicated to make it so that just when you click the run button, something different happens, or you have some custom configuration. Really easy here. You can just change that default file to something you want a custom
command. Yeah.
Yep, custom command that you want to type in, and every time the student clicks the run button, it will do that instead.
Yeah, so I can do something totally arbitrary, like have it spit out some message into the console. This is all Bash, so you pretty much, you know, any sort of standard Linux terminal command will work here as well. And for example, we have folks who use Maven, all these like different dependency managers for Java. If you happen to be getting that deep with your students, you can also use this. And you can also use Git here as well. So I can, you know, for example, I can Git clone something into this, or I can Git init, and you'll see that we start syncing up our Git directory. And so yeah, in that sense, I'd say we're running into very few things that people can't do in coding rooms. You can also run servers here. We expose several ports. So when you hit the like view desktop, for example, you're actually hitting that server that is running your students' code. So if you're building Java web apps, for example, you know, you can actually have students host an entire application on coding rooms as well. So that's I'd say a pretty thorough introduction to what we do at coding rooms. I think, you know, we started with the live classroom, and that's the thing that we try to do best. But we've built out a fairly large solution now over the past couple of years, and we're excited to have more folks joining in. When it comes to support, we actually staff our live support 24/7. It's available if you go to codingrooms.com in-app or on the landing page. There's a little chat icon here. And so these are some faces of our colleagues, and you can send a message anytime. And then we also have a support center. So help.codingrooms.com you can search for different articles, and we have pretty much have articles for everything from you as an instructor to your students. They can also use this as a reference to get help with coding rooms. And if you're looking to use the Java and Python assignments that we have, you can also just drop us a message in the live chat, and we will upload those to your account within a few hours of letting us know. And those are free to use just as part of the entire Coding Room subscription.
Yeah, so there's 100, there's a little over 100 different small exercises in Python and Java that they'll offer for free that you can just use and hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm.
Great for AP, A review, just to give your students some practice with some different concepts and stuff without you having to build anything.
Yep.
So Sasha, what is the pricing model for all this stuff?
Sure. We have, for K-12, we basically have two options. One is a monthly plan, which is $50 a month. And then we also have a annual plan, which is $500 a year. It works out to about $42 a month. And that's per teacher. So your teacher account can have unlimited courses and unlimited students. And as we add features, we always grandfather existing users into whatever pricing scheme. So as we add features and update our pricing, all existing users get the pricing that you signed in with. And we're also fully backwards compatible on everything. So actually, Joe has kind of been a user long enough to see this migration that we made from what we're calling V1 of coding rooms to V2. And actually, if you do something like create a new classroom or a new workspace, you can see this little toggle saying enable V2. We went through a really big migration, adding we basically rebuilt our IDE from the ground up. And we still offer full backwards compatibility for the rest of the semester for our old version. For a long time, this was opt-in, and we recently made this the default. So we're also very committed to working with teachers through your schedules and making sure that as we update the platform and anything, you don't have crazy surprises in terms of what works and what doesn't and stuff like that.
Do you have a free trial period for us to play around with it, or?
Yep. We offer 30 days free trial. If you need more time, again, the live chat support at the bottom, you can just message us there and we can extend that if you need.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I tried it for a little more than 30 days. I asked for an extension just because I wanted more time with my students just to make sure everything was good. And so Mario, when you asked support, that's one of the things I'll really praise, Sasha and Kareem and all the Coding Rooms teams is they, and probably because they're a newer company also, but they really do care, and they're there for teachers, and they've supported me a lot and have worked with me as a customer to make sure that the product's working well for me and my students.
And we've actually we've grown quite a bit, but I don't think, if anything, the level of support that we've provided has probably increased. We provide a median response time of just under 2 minutes for any chat message that comes in. Technically, even your students can use that. We occasionally answer questions for students. Of course, we get a certain amount of spam from students asking us to fix their homework, and we don't solve those tickets. But if they have legitimate issues or they need help with their account or whatever, that option is available for anyone who goes onto the site. One of the last things I really wanted to show was an example of using.
Sasha, I think you're passing up a revenue stream on those students to want help on their homework.
Yeah, intentionally, at least for the moment. One thing I really wanted to show was Visual Studio Code in coding rooms. This is on our testing site right now, but it should be up for the end of the month.
So I was using when I was just using my lab, I was using Visual Studio Code. This is really exciting for me. Mary, you might be excited about this if you're using it as a way that students can just use Visual Studio Code right in the web browser.
Yep. And you can see my Java environment is loading up here. But all I did was I created on our test environment, I created a Java workspace. And I opened up this Visual Studio Code server that's running on that server. And I'm able to edit here, and all my changes immediately sync back over to coding rooms. You can see that I added a line in Visual Studio Code, and then it got synced back into coding rooms. And I can demo the debugger, for example. So I can click to debug, and we are in the browser running plain old VS Code, debugging a Java problem. And most extensions will work here as well. Kind of the last things that we're tidying up before we release this into production is the experience for students, so it's easier for them to switch between our IDE and Visual Studio Code. And then also finishing up the live editing integration, so that even if you're in Visual Studio Code and coding rooms, you'll be able to see each other's cursors and locations within the VS Code instance. So I can do all my standard debugging stuff here. Pause the debugger. I don't know if a lot of y'all are using Git, but that's also available through the graphical interface in VS Code. And then the nice thing is, if you're, as the instructor, are still in coding rooms and you make a change here, for example, it also will sync back to Visual Studio Code. And you get a little underline here. Let's say, for example, if I were to delete that here and go back to coding rooms, we see it update. And then even if you want to do code playback, you can see the full code playback. So it's like a higher resolution Git when it comes to managing code versions and edit histories.
Is that going to be part of the live classroom or the assignments or both?
It's part of everything. So students will be able to basically, if they're in the live classroom, they'll be able to click like open in VS Code. And then your students can actually have like the live classroom tab and then Visual Studio Code. And then you as the instructor, it doesn't really matter where they're editing because you're able to still see the single dashboard within coding rooms because all the changes are synced back.
And it even Sasha, show off in IntelliSense, and
yeah.
So it has it's all the bells and whistles of VS Code you get there also. So if you want some more intelligent code completion and stuff like that when students are typing, VS Code will offer that.
And we're working on neater ways for you to be able to manage like your VS Code config and all that kind of stuff through coding rooms. So you can do things like turn on the dark theme and stuff like that. And I think, as Joe mentioned, the code completion for Java takes a sec to load up and get set up on your project, but otherwise it's there. Same thing when it comes to like jars and package management. You can just upload the jars and run them. All that's kind of being integrated into the experience here. And on production, if you want to test what one of our existing ID integrations looks like, you can actually go to create a new workspace. And I can show off our Jupyter Notebooks integration. So Jupyter Notebook files aren't quite as pretty to view here because it's just JSON data, but you can open up the Jupyter Notebook server here. And so if I open up the Jupyter Notebook file, And I can go and make a change, run it, save it, and you see that it got synced back to here. So instead of hello world, now it says hello. So we already have an integration of professional ID syncing back to coding rooms in production. And this is used with a few data science courses that are running on coding rooms today.
I have a question about using GUIs in Java. You know, Java has a pretty robust GUI interface, and you mentioned that it's not easy to do graphics. So are you able to use the full version, the full GUI things in Java, or are you limited?
So you're, as far as I'm aware, right, and I could be wrong about some edge cases, but you're able to use all the GUI libraries in Java. If are you using Java FX?
What?
A Java FX?
I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, probably not. Java FX is kind of a more niche library, but
so how is it projected? You said that it's very hard to do graphics, but you know, I mean, you can do 3D graphics in Java with their GUI libraries, but you said it's very limited, so I'm a little confused about that.
I guess what I was trying to say is that usually graphics like on online IDEs are really limiting, but we've spent a long time to get them working nicely online. So this is a Java Swing example.
Okay.
So it's running here. I don't think it prints anything out, but I'll just open a new tab so it's bigger here. So you can see it running here as well. So this is Java Swing. You can use also Java AWT. I'll share this link with y'all so that you can go in there. You won't be able to edit this one. That's a read-only link, but you can click fork, and then that will create your own copy of it. So you can play around.
So you can do 3D graphics. Anything that you can do in Java, you can, you know, Java Swing, for example, you can do in this platform.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's no limitations, at least with Java Swing library. There are potential cases where, like, if you need a specific type of GPU, you know, you could run into some things, but I'm not aware of, and we actually have a solution for that. It's just not something that we really publicly offer at the moment. But as far as I'm aware, that doesn't impact Java.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you have some crazy, you know, video game dev library of some sort that you're trying to run, you shouldn't have any issues. I've done some, you know, more resource intensive kind of animations and stuff.
Right.
And everything works well. Any of the courses that I know most of you teach, probably some of the graphics and stuff you would do, it's going to work very, very well, especially for an online environment.
Okay, good. And no problem with speed or efficiency?
That's what blows my mind about it.
Oh,
No,
really?
Not really.
Wow.
Because Replit does support, you know, GUIs and things. And that was my frustration, is sometimes it wouldn't work at all, just for whatever reason. And, or it was just incredibly slow. And in coding rooms, it just works like magic.
Do you know why? What's the difference? What's in the back that causes it to go better than other things?
I can speak to that a little bit. The first and foremost difference is that we do dedicated resource allocation for each student's workspace, right? Okay. So there's actually only one server running you know, per workspace. So there's only one place where this code is physically running. And then we make sure that we limit all the students who are on that physical machine to a certain resource utilization, and we don't overpack our instances. So Replit, for their workspaces, they overpack the machines, which if you're kind of running a free service like that, that's really the only way to do it. Otherwise, it's really hard. But we have guaranteed, or sorry, really expensive. But we have guaranteed resources that your students will have. So I've noticed, like, for example, on the forums with people having like out of memory exceptions and stuff like that, it's still possible to have those in coding rooms. Of course, I mean, you can have that on your own laptop, depending on what you're doing. But generally, you're a lot less likely to have those just because of the way that resources are being allocated. There's also some different implementations of the actual a protocol for the virtual desktop, but I don't think that those are major enough to cause the difference that you'll probably experience. Yeah. Are there any other questions or discussion? I know we're kind of coming towards the end of the session.
I have a question about, it's kind of on a different note, but what do you do with student data? Is it all FERPA and COPA compliant?
Yeah, so for the different jurisdictions, we have different policies, as they are applicable to different regions, mainly on a state-by-state basis. So for Rhode Island, I mean, Joe has gone through the approval process, and we're compliant for all the Rhode Island requirements. Some other things, basically, that we store all student data encrypted at rest, which is pretty much industry standard now. And then we also use a special authentication service. So all the more sensitive student data is stored with a set of professionals. We actually don't manage that stuff ourselves.
And coding rooms is open to, if your school wants for services, individually signed agreements, coding rooms is open to doing that, which I know is a big thing now. And so that's another benefit is, Replit will not sign. So if you're using those, they will not sign any privacy agreements, and they're not with the main service, they're not FERPA compliant.
And also for live classrooms, you can join, you can have your students join anonymously as well. They can just provide a name. They don't have to actually sign up. But for the rest of the platform, they do actually have to register an email address. You're free to use virtual or anonymous emails to register if you need.
Sasha, do you have it so that you can get reports from the classrooms page you had shown us? Like, did the student raise their hand? How long did they spend time engaged? Do you have, does it produce reports for the teachers?
No, but we're tracking that data. So that's one of the things that we have in our plan, to have an easier way to download an engagement report from a live classroom.
And does it start fresh the next day, or does it have residual memory of where we were the day before?
So each classroom is fully persistent. So anything you did in the last session will be exactly the same the next session, including chat and everything.
So the undo button, the what did you call it? Like the step button?
Mm-hmm.
Will that work?
Playback. Yeah.
It'll work from day to day?
Yep.
Okay.
As long as you
Thank
keep
you.
the same live classroom open, you keep going back to that same one. Yeah. So you can create different, typically what I do is I create a different one for each lesson, because students can always go back to it and like look at it as notes anyway. So I do a new one each lesson, but I could definitely see people doing it like per unit. You just have a live classroom. I could see a lot of different setups, because you can just continue to reopen it each day if you want.
Yep. And when you actually exit a live classroom, there's two different options. So in here is the instructor. So I can either finish or leave. If I finish, it'll actually boot you all out until I decide to restart it. So you can kind of force students to leave. And then next day when you're ready to start class, you can open it back up. And it won't delete any code or anything. It'll be like,
If you leave, how long does it stay open?
forever. Yep. So students can go back through the history and drop in and review their code, and they can also just download it.
Yeah, so what I do is I just leave it open, and then they just use that as their notes. I tell them to take all their notes and everything as we're going through a lesson right in there, and they click on the link and they can go back and look at all that stuff if they want at any point in time. Now, I did talk to somebody else that uses coding rooms, and what he does is he's used the live classroom for an assessment, like a live coding kind of assessment. And then so he clicks finish and doesn't reopen it to look at the student's code until later. So it kicks all the students out at the time, like end of class cutoff type of thing. So I find that very interesting. I haven't done that myself, but it's another interesting way you can use it, because you can watch all the students as they're going through, check on everything, and then come back to it to evaluate it later on.
Are there any other questions about the live classroom or the assignments? Happy to stick around and answer for you guys.
You mentioned that you were working on or considering kind of joining the two so that you could have live classroom and then be graded. Do you have a time frame on that?
For that would probably be like within the next 2 months or so. We like the first huge thing we did was we did this really massive migration to V2, where we rewrote all these key components, and we rewrote everything around workspaces as a central sort of data type for anywhere where there's code and coding rooms. Under version 2, you're guaranteed to have a workspace backing that. And since now workspaces are for assignments and live classrooms, and we have a good system of managing them, the next step is to basically spawn a live classroom from a set of workspaces in an assignment, right? And which would also be interesting for like temporary live classrooms where students have been working on an assignment, and then you click new live classroom for the assignment, and then all the students could jump in, work on it live in class, and then when they leave the classroom, they still have the workspace. So basically attaching live classroom as a sort of like this ephemeral sort of add-on for assignments is probably the first way that you'll see this. And then after that, maybe we'll add something on the sidebar, for example, where you can just select a problem from the course and have that update and then run tests and stuff. Any other points I can help with? We also have been running webinars on a pretty consistent basis, and we have a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. So I also do a weekly podcast where we talk about things related to CS education, as well as some tangents related to coding rooms. If you're interested in kind of being a part of that, let me know. You can drop me an email or message the live chat. We're always happy to have new and interesting perspectives. And we really mean it when we care about feedback. And I know that the folks who've been with us for more than a month or two have really seen how we kind of operate on a day-to-day basis. So I'm sure you all will see that if you end up going with coding rooms.
They take the teachers' feedback, users' feedback, with a lot of care and consideration. And there are a few things that you saw today that was direct feedback from me. So that was impressive to see that the feedback you're giving to a product, to a company, they take seriously and they actually integrate it.
I feel like I could use a whole training session. Multi-classes, that's
Yeah, yeah, maybe we can set one up. Also, if you message us, we do free one-on-one demos. So you can just go to our website and schedule a call at any time that works for you. And we can help you set up your first classroom, make sure that you're ready to actually teach your first class, because we understand that it's kind of a lot to jump into a new tool. And then especially when it's so kind of different from the way that most, frankly, like the way most of us have been teaching. So we really appreciate that. And we're also working on a lot more resources that you can use async on the Help Center and stuff.
Good. I think I'm going to try it out this week with my kids.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. I think maybe after this, I'll make sure to share a new document that we have that's like the before your first class, and you can check out kind of all the things that we recommend setting up before you actually run your first class in coding rooms. And a couple of things to note, like I'm running this on a fairly small little MacBook Pro with a Zoom and a screen share and everything. And I think I have about 30 people in here with a ton of different Chrome tabs and everything. And my performance is still really decent. This is something that we worked a lot on to actually make this environment really performant so that you could switch between different students' code really quickly and load up these environments so that the overhead of the tool doesn't make it really lame to use, which is definitely something that I think some folks did experience performance issues with the very first version of coding rooms. And that's all patched now.
Yeah, if you could send us that first user guide, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Do you have our info? How would you get to us?
Sasha, you can send it to me, and then I'll send a follow-up email
Great, thank you.
to everyone. Anybody who registered, I'll just send it out.
Did anybody show up late and need the attendance Google form?
We can just throw it in the chat anyway, Mike, just one more time. All right, so there's Mike just threw the attendance form in the chat if you need it at all. Any final questions before we end with Sasha? Anybody can feel free to email me also at any point in time if you have any questions that you want to just bounce some things off of me. I'm open to that. And Anne, since you sent my son such nice gifts, I will even help you out personally if you want.
He's adorable.
Thank you.
Sasha, is there any connection to Google Classroom? I don't know if I would want one or not, but my world's being run by Google Classroom. Like all the assignments are in Google Classroom and going that way. So is that on the horizon?
A deeper integration is on the horizon, I would say. Although I'm not sure what happened on a timeline that makes sense for this semester, but your students can sign in using Google.
Yeah.
Which kind of is at least the main hurdle we've seen, just so that the onboarding process is easier for your students.
Yeah, so my students just sign in with their Google account. What I do is you can take the URLs for things like the live classroom or an assignment, and you can post that, so it's very easy for your students. They still have one-stop shop. They go to Google Classroom for their assignments, but just so happens that a coding room's URL is now there. They click on it, complete the task.
If there's anything else, you can also feel free to email me directly, or it's Sasha, S-A-S-H-A, at codingrooms.com. I also have hello@codingrooms.com for more general stuff, and the live support chat as well. If you have urgent problems, like if you're in the middle of the class and something doesn't work, make sure to use the live chat. We'll probably get your problem solved really quickly.
All right, thanks everyone.
So I was just about to say, I think we'll stick around for a couple minutes if someone has lingering questions, but thank you everyone for attending. I hope you have a wonderful night.